Hello, wonderful souls. I wanted to sit down with you today and talk about money and pricing in the spiritual business. This is not my usual kind of content, but I've had this beautiful ongoing conversation this week with a really dear soul sister who is also in the community running a beautiful business. And we had this chat that I thought I would share with you some of the highlights. I am not a money expert or guru or financial advisor by any means. I am someone who's been running a spiritual business for a few years. So, speaking from experience and also all that I know and have been taught by direct guidance around abundance and creation and the money system here on earth. So, we had a conversation about the difficulty of pricing yourself sometimes. And if you're about to start a spiritual business, thinking about it, or if you've been running it for a long time, I see a journey, a recurring journey with money where it's important to understand from the get-go that there is no amount of human money that will represent, that will reflect the value of what you really do, the value of what you really bring. Much like an artist, a painter, a musician, when you pay for their services, you're not just paying for the paint and buying the brushes and the canvas and the time that it took to paint the painting. You're paying for the experience, you're paying for the training, you're paying for creativity. If it is channeled and there's an energetic transmission through it, you're also paying for that. It is so multi-layered, the work that we actually do, that there is no amount of money that will cover that. So it's important to understand and accept that. And for you to really understand how you work, what is required in order for you to show up and do your work in the best way. And most people won't know that what really happens when you prepare for a reading, when you prepare for a healing session or a workshop or a retreat is, and I can only speak for myself here, before a healing session there is an hour, sometimes more, of preparation to clear the space, clear my energy, ground, protect my energy, open up a sacred space, call in the guides, your higher self, your guides, your ancestors, to really prepare my body to be in a state of channeling as well. And the session unfolds, and then there is, after that, clearing the space, closing the space, cleansing my energy, placing the client in a template of light for their integration and for their protection during that time. And there's the whole lifestyle that goes with being able to do energy healing in the best possible way, which means watching how you eat and watching, where you invest your energy and the kind of relationship you have. And this is not to be perfectionist. There are definitely ways that I could care for myself better that I don't, but if I decide to go out drinking and come home really late and really drunk, I cannot be expected to show up for a healing session in the morning. It's not going to happen. So there are adjustments that we naturally make when we start offering energy services in any capacity, and all of that participates in you being able to provide the service to the best of your ability. So do you see how layered it is? In order to put a price on what you do, you first have to be very clear with the value that you bring. Now, in terms of pricing itself, there's often a journey that I've seen with people starting with low prices, and that's a way to start the spiritual business, to acquire more clients and gain experience and gain self-confidence with that. Low prices often allow more people to come to you and, who can afford it more easily. And it's really great to start in that place because it allows you to get your business going. And often people will be guided to slowly increase their prices after a while. And that's a guidance from the divine to allow you to open up, to receive more, to hold a greater capacity for abundance in your physical vessel, to hold that abundance and also be really aware of your value. So there's that journey to gently increasing the prices so that it reflects more the value that you bring. And sometimes people will reach really high prices and will stay there. And that's what feels aligned for them. That's what feels, good and abundant. And there's nothing wrong with high prices. But sometimes there's also a journey back from that, a journey back from high prices to adjusting your prices. And that is really finding the balance between an idea of service, so that your services are available to more people, and this financial stability and abundance that allows you to cover your expenses, pay your rent, pay your bills, but also on top of that, being able to invest in projects, being able to go on holidays and take sick days, be able to save some money. There's a balance, there's a middle ground to find between them, and only you know where that middle ground is. And I will say, in that regards, pay attention to your body, pay attention to your physical cues. So the advice that I give to help people price their services, this comes up sometimes, in the work that I do in mentorship or during healing sessions. The topic of money and abundance comes up, and people ask me, how do I price myself? There is the traditional business approach of looking at your expenses, covering your expenses, adding profit on top of that. There's another traditional approach, which is looking at your competition. I don't like that word, but looking at your competition and what other people are pricing. And there's nothing wrong with that, with these approaches. But I always invite people to tune in with the third approach, which is maybe a more spiritual, energetic one, which is to receive your prices intuitively. So for that, you can grab a piece of paper and you can start with a very low number, really dramatically low number. And when you see that number on paper, when you visualize it in your mind's eye, see how that feels in your body when you're really not receiving enough for what you're going to offer. And then you start increasing that price slowly, slowly, slowly in your vision or on paper. And every time you visualize a new number, an increased number, see how that feels in your body until you reach really high numbers. Now you're going to find a range there. You're going to find a range below which your body feels really uncomfortable, very depleted, maybe very tired. That's the sign that you're not receiving enough abundance. Maybe there's anger and resentment and frustration coming up as well. If you picture yourself pricing and receiving that amount for your service. So that's going to feel that's not going to feel good because it's way too low. And then there's a comfort range. And after a while it gets uncomfortable again. And that's because you're hitting your upper glass ceiling. The limit that you have put on yourself unconsciously on how much abundance you can receive. So that's often related to your self-worth, how much you think you deserve, how much you will allow yourself to be compensated for the gifts that you bring, how much you value the gifts that you bring as well. So find that comfortable range, and that tells you where your pricing is. Now you can be on the upper side of that, on the lower side of that, but I would say stay within that range. And you may find over time that that range increases. That means you feel more and more comfortable receiving more abundance for the value that you bring. And that's a really good sign. So what is really important with that is that relationship with your worth, that relationship with yourself, with knowing the value that you bring, and really doing your best to be seen and to be heard, to showcase your talents, to show and explain to people what you do. This is not about justifying your prices. This is really about explaining and broadcasting what it is that you offer, and having a close group of friends or acquaintances that truly see you for who you are, that truly acknowledge you, that can reflect back to you who you are and what you bring in their life. And, client feedback that tells you the work that you've done and how it's been received. It's very important to be seen and acknowledged. We all need that. That's a human need. And it's important to receive that, even if it's from close friends and family and a small group of clients. The reason why I say that is because you may find that there is a fringe of your clientele, or maybe even most of your clients, who do not really seem to reflect the value, the power, the scope of the work that you do with them. And this means nothing about the work that you do with them. And I really insist on that. This is because sometimes you work with people who just cannot perceive the value of the work that you do. It goes beyond their awareness. it goes beyond their level of understanding. Maybe the work that you do is so high vibrational that most people aren't capable of perceiving what you've actually brought to them through the work. And again, it's important to know that, to avoid disappointment and attaching your worth and your value to the feedback that you get, to be constantly chasing that reassurance that indeed you do good work and it's transformational. And with all that I've shared right now, I can share a few personal stories with you that will exemplify that. There was a whole period of time when I started doing healing sessions. It was actually around a 3 months period, which is quite long, where every single healing session that I would prepare for, I'd be sitting here with my guides, and I would feel them coming and say, oh, the person you're going to work with right now, we're just letting you know they're going to be very disappointed in that session. And they're going to think you're a fraud. They're not going to see any difference before and after the session. They won't leave you any testimonial or positive feedback. And at the beginning I went, wow, thank you guys. That's very motivating. Suddenly I feel really chuffed about this session. Why would you say this? Why would you almost frame me for failure? I don't understand. And they explained that this was so that I would detach from the feedback that I get, so that I could trust what it is that I perceive during the session. What I can see is happening energetically that the client cannot perceive. And that's the whole point. That's the whole reason why they're booking a session, because there are blind spots, things that they can't perceive. And the guides wanted me to really come to trust myself, to trust my gifts, to trust the value of what I bring. And sure enough, it was 3 difficult months where every single session, people would be very disappointed and they would think, well, I didn't really feel anything. Yeah, I feel the same as when I walked in. And then I would reach out again because I'm really big on providing aftercare. It's really important for me. And I would reach out to them and ask, if anything had changed. And they said, no, nothing had changed, because the work happened on such a deep level. It was clearing and seeding things for the future. And much of the work I do, unfolds that way. We clear things on a deep, unconscious, subconscious, karmic, ancestral level, and the effects of the healing sessions unfold a few months later. Now, sometimes there are some very quick turnarounds and shifts unfolding in people's life after a session, but it's often seeded for the future. And they'll tell me months, sometimes years after a session, oh, I started thinking about that thing that you said, or that thing that came up during our session, and it's been a year and a half, and I'm getting it now. So had I not gone through that 3 months period, I would still be constantly, attaching my value to the feedback I receive. And I would doubt myself all the time, and I would lose my confidence, and I would doubt that this is what I'm meant to be doing. Now, this was a tough initiation, but it was a very powerful one that gave me that grounding. Similarly, the journey with pricing for me has been to slowly increase my prices over the years. And it was very clear when I stepped into 2023 that my prices would decrease a little bit. And that's because I don't feel the need to increase them. That's very clear to me. And the idea of serving and making my services available to more people feels very joyful and very abundant in my heart. And I knew that I wanted to make my sessions a bit more affordable. So my soul alchemy healing sessions, for example, the price is back to what it was in 2021, before I increased it last year. And that feels really good. That feels joyful. I'm excited. Now, if I were feeling any kind of frustration or resentment or lack in my body, in my heart, at the idea even of decreasing my prices, I wouldn't have done it, because that is a clear sign of misalignment. But it felt very expensive and very open-ended to do that. And so I followed the guidance. So these are a few examples of, yes, what happens with money and pricing. We do the best that we can to showcase our talents and the value of the work that we do, the transformation it brings in people's lives, whether it is completely perceived or not. We can only do our best to explain what we do and who we are, but some of it is going to go above some people's head. And similarly, those who are meant to work with you and find you, they won't even need to read the description, to be honest, of what you do or read your website. They will feel in their heart a resonance with the space that you hold. I know that's the case for me. Those who work with me feel a very clear guidance, a very clear yes in their heart to work together. I've had some people signing up for my mentorship who had never even heard of me before, never read an Instagram post, who just went on my website, they saw the page, mentorship page, and they didn't even read through the whole page. It was just a clear yes in their heart and a pull to join that space. So I've come to understand that I do my best to show who I am and explain what I do, and then there's a part of that is not in my hands. It's the energy doing its work. It's the frequency. Frequency doesn't lie. So you may post, beautiful pictures, have really beautiful branding, and that's really good if you enjoy that. I enjoy that for myself. I enjoy beautiful branding. I do my best to have a beautiful branding. I have Venus in Taurus. I love beautiful things. But beyond that, I don't stress too much about that, because it's about the frequency. As long as when I write a post, when I make a visual, I'm feeling happy and I'm excited to talk about it, that's all that matters. The frequency will reach whoever it needs to reach. So I hope that this helped you in any way, maybe give you some reassurance, some courage to go out there and increase your prices if you need to increase them, to launch your business if you need to launch it, to review, reassess how you've been doing business so far if you've been in this field for a while. And keep in mind, that's the last thing I'll mention, that when it comes to abundance and money and pricing, we are coming into contact with many ancestral programs and belief systems around scarcity, around what it means to have a lot of money, what it means to be rich and wealthy versus what it means to be poor. And we are coming into contact with many karmic experiences of poverty, of bankruptcy, of sudden wealth, and what we've done with it and how it's impacted those around us. Also many vows that we have made in past lives, vows of poverty, vows of not holding any property. For example, living in community, in religious communities, that was the case a lot. People would agree to join the monastery and not have any not own anything for themselves. So you come into contact with these experiences, with these soul agreements and contracts that are way in the unconscious mind. So bear that in mind. It's not just from this life. So it's good to receive support to clear that. Feel free to reach out for a healing session if that speaks to you. My books are open right now. Yes, get the support that you can, but ultimately it's the relationship with yourself that matters, knowing your value, and yes, trusting that. Trust yourself. I send you a warm hug.